and anything else you'd like to share. I guess I'll start off. My name is Buchanan. I've been a product manager for about 12 or 13 years. I've spent the last 8 or 9 years helping the companies that I work for build out product management, the discipline inside of their company, both as a full-time employee and as a consultant. I was the first product manager at Abercrombie and Fitch back in like 2009, I think, and worked there for 5 years. When I left, we were up to about 20 PMs, so kind of got to see what it looked like to go from, small team to a bigger team. I went to a Gap, and I was one of 14 product managers, and I was on the low end of the totem pole there. I was hired on as a senior PM, and we had all the way up to a chief product officer. So we had like 3 VPs of product, multiple directors, and I was promoted into a director role pretty quickly and built out a team there. And when I left, after being there for about 6 years, we went from 14 PMs and a chief product officer to 250, almost 300 product managers. So it was really cool to see that that growth and how impactful a role product management could have inside of a large enterprise that wasn't even selling the technology that we were building. It was more of an enabler for our business. So it's kind of interesting. I'm looking at these photos here, Becca. That's funny. I went to a couple startups, I was employee 1 at one startup, employee 3 at another startup for a couple of years doing freelance work, and then started a consulting company in Columbus that just does product management consulting. So everything from transformation to coaching teams or coaching product managers to product strategy and discovering the right thing to build. That's been really fun because I've learned a lot about just a lot of different industries that I've never worked in before. And I've got to work with a ton of different product managers and just really appreciate how hard product management is and how hard building products is just generally. It's incredibly complex. It's incredibly messy. And that's why I think it's fun. If it isn't those things, you're probably not moving at the pace that you could be, or going after, disruptive innovation that you could be. So anyways, that's part of what we wanted to talk about today, is just what does it take to like be successful in that really difficult, messy environment that is product. So I'll stop there. I'm also a family man. I've got 4 kids, 2 to 9. My house is pretty crazy right now. Our babysitter called off, so I had my 2-year-old on my lap for a couple of meetings this morning, which just threw everything for a curveball. But yeah, I'll pass it over to Super. Super, if you could do an intro.
Yep, sounds good. Hey everyone, thanks for joining. I'm Super, currently a product manager at Upstart. My summary of my journey is kind of got started just building small websites. That's how I got into tech. Then eventually transitioned to starting my own startup, sort of in the B2C consumer media space. Did that for about 4.5 years, and then transitioned to really product management at that time, and have sort of worked at generally growth stage companies since. So worked at a company called Buffer in sort of small B2B marketing. And then, most recently here at Upstart. Currently focused on sort of our B2B side of the business with bank partnerships. And for those of you that don't know, just a quick summary of Upstart, we build machine learning and AI models to provide better outcomes for consumers applying for loans. So practically what that means is we can offer far lower rates and approve far more people than really any bank or current lending system that exists out there. And the way we're trying to get this to people is partnering with banks because they have existing deposit customers. they reach a lot of people every day and they want to serve those people better. So by using sort of our technology, they can provide much better rates for those people and ideally better financial outcomes in the long run.
Awesome. Well, so Becca, I'd love to just, if anyone wants to come off and mute and just share a little bit about your background. Becca, if you want to maybe start and introduce yourself, and then we'll kind of just go around the horn, no pressure there. But I think that'd be great given how small of a meetup we've got here.
Yeah, my name is Becca, Rebecca Murray. I am a software developer at TechLife, which for anyone that doesn't know is a software development boot camp, which I actually graduated from this time last year. So I am new to the tech industry, but I have lots of years of restaurant management in my background. So I've decided to volunteer for TechLife just so I can meet people and listen to really interesting conversations. So, and I'm a kitty mom of 3.
Congratulations on that. TechLife or Tech Elevator. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great. And everybody.
Hey, Ivy, I saw you turned on your video.
Hi, my name's Ivy. I'm actually a technical recruiter. So the people that I work with are mostly product managers, project managers, and I'm pretty new to the industry. So I just like to kind of join these user groups just to learn a little bit more. Still learning all the technical terms, but I like to hear from actual people, you know, what issues you're having, what you're doing that's been working, what new technologies you're using. So and I'm also a cat mom.
Where does
I think this conversation will probably help with that. Is there anyone else that wanted to do an intro? If not, we can get kicked off. Yeah, so Ivy, I think this this might build on what you're looking for, because what we wanted to talk about today is just, you know, product management is a difficult thing to visualize, even if you've done the role for a while. Like it's kind of known or famous for having imposter syndrome. It's a role that's very broad in scope. It means things at different companies. You know, Super's role probably definitely looks different than what my role did at Gap. Although I would have loved your software at Gap, because one of my products was responsible for driving acquisition of new credit card holders. And the issuing bank that we were working with was Synchrony, really struggled with that. So you need to call on them, Super.
Yeah, on our list.
They have some interesting data points too around what type of phone you're using, because I'm sure those are things you're looking at. But anyways, we need to nerd out on that sometime, because I'd love to talk to you about it. But one of the ways that I think it's helpful for people to understand or learn more about product management, and I do this with some of my coaching, is just understanding like the personality traits that really help make someone be successful in this role. And so that's what we wanted to talk about, Super and I. Like, what are the personality traits that help make the role successful? Why are those personality traits helpful? And what are some real world examples of what happens if you don't instill some of these different characteristics? And it's not meant to generalize. So it's not meant to, you need to be this type of person. It's just some observations that we've had that, might get this group thinking a little bit differently. So Super, what would you say is one of the main things that have helped you from a different characteristic, I guess you could say, be more successful in your role?
Yeah, that's a good question. And to start, I'll say, like, the way I think about some of these things are they could be like a personality trait where you kind of think back and you're like, oh yeah, people have always told me that I had this since I was a kid. And that's just the way that you were. Or it could be something that you learn and just like a behavior you reinforce. And for some of these, I wasn't like this earlier. And then you just kind of work on it like any other skill and you improve on it and kind of get better. So I want to just say that just so, people looking at this aren't like, oh, I need to be all of these things right off the bat in order to be successful. Not really. It's rare that people just have all these skills magically. You kind of just work at it and develop it like anything else over time. So with that, I think like one of the first ones that comes to mind that's helped me a lot is I need a better, catchier title for this, but just like the general willingness to go figure something out. And it sounds pretty general, but what it looks like in product management is, for example, like earlier last year when I joined Upstart about January 2020, and around March, we were thinking about launching a new product. And at the time, it was literally just an idea of we could go do this, build this out, and we think it might be interesting to the market. Going from that to actually like launching it later last year involved a whole bunch of things, and some of which were, how do we go market this? How do we go talk to banks about this product? How do we know if they're even interested in this? And at the time, we didn't really have a marketing team built out on the bank partnership side. And so wasn't really anyone else to go do it. And usually when that is the case, it falls on the product manager, where you don't really have someone for that role. Well, guess what? It's you. So at that time, it was sort of, how do we go figure out creating a marketing plan? And I hadn't created something that formal for sort of large enterprises before. And so for me, that looked like a lot of Googling, reaching out to anybody I could find that had worked in this sort of space before in sort of like enterprise B2B marketing, talking to them, seeing if they could get 30 minutes with them. And just sort of doing anything you can to make forward progress and being willing to hit dead ends all the time. People don't get back to you. You take a call, it doesn't end up being actually helpful. You put like an initial pitch deck together and show it to somebody that's been doing this for a while and they say, it's really not that great. You meet with a bank and show it to them, it doesn't resonate, or they're silent the whole time. You kind of talking to a quiet room. All of those things are things that you just need to be willing to take and expect almost, and not let that get in your own head. So one of the things that helps me when I do that is I think about the inputs that I'm putting in. I think about the work that I put in, the effort I put in, the people I reach out to, and less about I need to get XYZ outcome right away. Because if you're kind of saying, I need to nail the first pitch that I go into and it's going to be perfect, you're just going to be disappointed in most cases because it's hard to get everything right off the bat. It takes time to really get good at it. So I think that's the first thing that comes to mind is sort of just, if you don't know something, you got to go figure it out. And how you do that is really up to you. I don't know if you found that in sort of the stuff you've done, Brett, but I imagine it's a similar skill set, but maybe applied differently at larger corporations too.
I think it's probably the number one skill set. I don't know if willingness, I think you referred to it as willingness. There's also like a grit to it and a level of resilience, excuse me. And got something stuck in my throat. Great timing. There's a level of resilience to it. Like, we kicked off this call saying product is hard. It's messy, it's complex. And the reason it's hard, messy, and complex is we don't know what we need to do to be successful most of the time. Like, we don't know what the marketing plan needs to be. We don't know what features and capabilities. Like, we have to figure that out. Like, that's why product managers exist, right? Our stakeholders think they might know, or our CEO thinks he might know, or data's telling us one thing, or competitors are doing something else, but we never know. And so there's a stress that comes with that. And there's a willingness and a resilience and grit that's needed to push through that. And what I've found is that's probably like perseverance. That's awesome, Tyler. I love that. Like that's probably the number one thing that product that I've needed in my career, or the people on my team have needed, because what I've found is when that perseverance isn't there, blockers are going to arise and the product team is going to kind of throw up their hands and say, sorry, we can't start this for 3 months. We're blocked by this other team or this, super, like the constraints you're up against in third-party fintech are like no other space out there. Like banks, you want to talk about moving slow and integrations and getting on their roadmap 24 months from now, maybe. Like, so you're constantly, in my experience, like when I was working with Visa and the Synchronies and the payment processors and all of those companies, is you have to come up with creative workarounds. Okay, this blocker's here. How do we persevere through that? What's a creative way to still accomplish what we're trying to in, 2 or 3 months versus like getting on Visa's roadmap in 20 months to still, to still hit these outcomes and achieve it. So
yeah, I think that's definitely right. And you almost have to get comfortable and then eventually hopefully enjoy just kind of not feeling like you don't know what you're doing a lot of the time, which is very different and sort of the opposite of, what many roles strive to, where if you're sort of specialized in a skill set, everyone's kind of heard about that person, whether it's in music or art or whatever, where they're firing on all cylinders or they're in a flow state and they're just crushing it with their best work ever. And that person probably feels great when they're kind of running through that. A lot of product, you're not going to feel that way a lot of the time. And that's fine. That's just sort of what the role is. So I think it's important for people who are trying to get into PM or are new to it to know that if you feel sort of like overwhelmed at times or that things are really messy or not really clear, that you're applying all these frameworks, but there's not really like an obvious answer is bubbling up, that just never goes away. And that's okay. It's okay to feel that way. It's fine that, there's not sort of magical solutions or you feel like you're just crushing it across the board, which you kind of opened with, Brett. If you kind of feel that way, then you're probably not pushing that hard, or maybe you've outgrown your current role. And there's always more to do, because no matter what company you're at or what products you're building, it's not like all your customers or consumers are saying, yep, you solved all my problems, business is perfect, we're done. That's just never going to be true. So there's always more to figure out. And really it's up to you as the PM to help your team explore new areas or just do better with what you're doing today.
Mm-hmm. We work with a lot of companies who are either introducing product management for the first time, or they're trying to shift from a sales-led strategy to a product-led strategy. And what's interesting though about it, or what's been interesting to me at least in kind of observing this, is it's not just a change inside of IT or a change inside of product. It takes a ton of courage from the CEOs of these companies as well, because it's a very uncomfortable way to work. Like if you think about the old way of working 10 to 20 years ago, when we couldn't move as quickly as we can today, like it was often executives sitting in a room saying, okay, what are the priorities that we're going to do for them this year? They would take that to IT. IT would say, oh, to build these projects, we're going to start here and we're going to end here. And here's our plan for the year. Well, those plans were wrong a lot. We've recognized that. And Agile's kind of taken the world by storm. And now we need to move a lot quicker. And with that means a level of uncomfort that you're talking about. Like this isn't a comfortable way of working for at first, especially. And so we see a lot of CEOs or a lot of companies not necessarily struggle with this, but have to increase the level of like courage that they have, I guess, in not having a plan in place. I've found that to be interesting. And what I see is the more mature companies who have either done this for a longer time or have more senior product managers, is they're not less messy. The ecosystems aren't less complex. And maybe they're not even as resilient, or they don't have as much perseverance. They know how to handle the mess. So they know how to react to it. They know how to deal with it, both culturally and from a frameworks and strategy and, whatever you want to call it, methodologies perspective. It's just they've done it before. Oh, yep. Okay, we've done this. We can apply this. This worked for us in the past, or whatever it may be. The next time you run into that marketing problem, you've gone through that, right? Like you've done that before. And so it's the same mess. It's the same job, but you have the experience to kind of react to it, right?
Yeah. I think that's an important part too, is letting some fires burn. You're always going to have something that's not working well or is broken. And dare I say, some stuff that you're just going to be behind on at any given point. And I think people transitioning from other careers into product, maybe that's just not how your current role works, or isn't acceptable in your current role, or just isn't how it's set up. But in product, that's just always going to be true. You're never going to have everything under control at all times. And if you try, you're really going to be short-circuiting yourself for sort of the medium long term, because when you're trying to figure out what this thing needs to be successful, whether it's your product or service or your team, a lot of that stuff is going to be medium long term. And you really need time to think about what's coming over the horizon instead of just dealing with the fires in front of you right now. And sort of if you think about like, what does that look like? You can tell sort of, I did this all the time when I was sort of early in product management is I felt like anytime anyone asked me about something and I had to say, oh, I'm not sure, or I have to get back to you on that, or haven't figured that out yet, I felt like I was failing them or wasn't doing my job well. And now I sort of embrace that. It's just part of the job is saying, oh, I haven't looked at that yet, or I actively chose to deprioritize that because X, Y, Z. Because if you don't do that, you're going to end up essentially just project managing your near-term priorities. You're going to put all the fires out and feel good for the week or the month. And then you'll look back 3 or 6 months from now and sort of wonder, what did we actually do for this product? Like, did it make a difference that I was here versus just the engineering team and design team? And that's not what you want as a good product manager. You really want to be able to look back on 3 or 6 months and say, okay, if my role didn't exist, we would have been on a different path or different trajectory. And you can't really do that if you're just trying to keep everything under control at all times. It's just not how the role is going to work.
Thanks, Super. I know we had a few people join after we got things kicked off. Carlos, and anyone else that's joined, I wanted to just mention this because you might have missed it at the beginning. Since we have such a large group, we wanted to make it as conversational as possible. And so feel free to come off mute to add anything, ask any questions. I think that would, on our side, we definitely appreciate that so that we can have a more productive conversation, because we want to make sure that you guys are walking away with, from this with more information. So resilience, grit, perseverance, like willingness to do all of those things, like super important. Definitely agree with you. What would you say is another characteristic, Super, that's been helpful for you in your PM career?
One thing that I don't know exactly how to summarize it all, but I'll do my best, is tying a few thoughts together of willing to sort of hear other people's feedback or perspective and not have a flinch reaction to it. And so I think it's sort of built into us, when you're younger or you're a kid, you kind of hear someone, and if they're critical of something you did or said, you just kind of like naturally recoil and sort of feel like off put by it. But in sort of product, you're going to not just get that feedback all the time from customers, from your team, from executives, et cetera. But really, if you're doing your job well, you want to go seek that out. I'd say, I forget where I read this, but I read basically like good PMs sort of ask a lot of questions about to fact check and validate their logic. They might ask, does this make sense? Or do these assumptions hold true? Do you think this is a good plan? And great PMs sort of actively seek to poke holes in their plans. What could go wrong with this? What do you think could delay this timeline? What am I not thinking of? And so you're sort of actively seeking out challenges to the work that you've done, because your goal isn't to have a PRD or a spec that looks great and everyone says, good job. Your goal is to, at the end of the day, make the product successful. And when you're working with stakeholders, there's sort of the bare minimum of, you kind of mentioned it earlier, in finance, we're probably like the second most regulated industry after healthcare. And we actively have to work with a bunch of different teams internally, InfoSec, compliance, legal, and often on the bank side, we work with their compliance team, their legal teams. And there's sort of the baseline of use them to unblock you and say, hey, what do I need to get your approval? But that's probably not good enough to make your product great. It's sort of going further than that and saying, how do I collaborate with this person, not think about them as a blocker or check mark to get, but really get their ideas on how they can make this thing better. So, I've had meetings before where we go in, we pitch an idea, we're really excited about it, and compliance says, you can't do that. Well, one way to treat that is, oh, you're getting in my way, you're blocking me from doing this. That's really annoying. How do I get around you? Well, the sort of better way for short and long term is to figure out why are they saying this? What's behind that? Seek to understand them and seek to understand where they're coming from, which will sort of help make the product better and frankly, make your job easier too.
Yeah, there's an element of humbleness there, I think, that is really important. I've hired a ton of product managers over the years, and companies reach out to Pathfinder, the company that I work for now, to help them, because I've gotten pretty good at that. And one of the things that I try to, one of the when I hear a product manager say I'm a visionary, I'm kind of the Steve Jobs of fintech or whatever. It makes me nervous because the reality is we're wrong a lot. I think Google says that they have to try like 8 different things before they get it right. And they've got some pretty smart people working there. So, humbleness, to your point, super, is important. Like, because this is a team sport. Like, building product is a team sport, and we're going to be wrong as product managers a lot. And the way to de-risk that is by bringing people in and listening to them and hearing out their ideas and their alternative perspectives. Because I haven't personally been able to come up with the best ideas. And so I actually like it when other people are doing product management. I've noticed that can frustrate product managers, like, that UX guy's stepping on my toes, or my CEO keeps like pushing these ideas to me. And for me, I found those things to be great because it makes my job easier. Like, our jobs as product managers, we're measured to drive outcomes. Mm-hmm. Like, we're not measured to come up with ideas. We're not measured to ship projects. We're not measured to deliver new capabilities. We exist to impact the business in a positive way, to meet some business objective or some business outcome. So for me, how we get there, whether it's my idea or someone else's idea, doesn't really matter, because that's not my job. My job isn't to come up with ideas. It's to take all those ideas that are coming in from all over the place and make sure that I'm getting data to validate those ideas and saying, okay, what are the known unknowns? Like, for all these ideas we have, what are the assumptions that we have? Where's their bias involved in that idea that we need to go and validate through an experiment or discovery or prototypes or talking to more users, whatever it may be. And there's an element of like, the word I keep going back to is like kind of humbleness about that, like knowing you're not always right. And the great thing about when you take that approach too is when you're successful and when things are going well, you got there as a team, and it's way more fun to celebrate that success as a team versus you got there by yourself and you're kind of on an island there, and it feels good, but it's not as fun. And when things don't go well, and they inevitably will, you're also feeling that pain as a team because it's everyone around you, and it's not your idea, it's not your thing. It's you take ownership and accountability of it, but you've brought the team along through the whole time, so they feel a little more frustrated, I guess, for lack of a better word, with you. They'll take some of that ownership on.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it too, especially, and that sort of is like, if you don't have that initial flinch reaction or recoil from feedback, you're creating that environment to encourage teammates to do that, to share ideas. If you think about it, you come in as a product manager, you're meeting your engineers, you got to build trust and rapport over a period of time. Well, if the first couple of times they say, hey, I'm not sure about this, and it might be dumb, but what do you think about this idea? And maybe you've spent a bunch of time thinking about it or not, but if any part of your reaction is basically like, oh yeah, that would never work because of this, or yeah, I don't think that's really something we should be looking at, or you kind of dismiss them, they're probably not going to come back to you with ideas 3, 4, and 5. And so you're doing yourself a disservice, the team a disservice, and even just from an enjoyment perspective, you want to have a good time at your job and sort of succeed alongside your teammates. So being able to consider that feedback and hear where they're coming from and really listen to them. I like this thing where I'll just word vomit at you, Brett, and you summarize it as humility. So I think that is a good summary of that one.
Yeah, no, you said some really cool things there. Trust, like there's a level of psychological safety, right, that you're creating where people can ideate, they can bring ideas to you. And that's also really important because, like, the best companies in the world, the best product companies in the world, they all have one thing in common. They're empowering their product teams to drive business outcomes. They recognize that the days of executives making all the decisions doesn't work. It's too slow, right? So they're all shifting to these empowered product teams. Marty Kagan wrote his newest book on it, called Empowered Product Teams. So with that comes a different type of skill set that engineers need to start to leverage where they just haven't in the past. Meaning, like, they're not just writing requirements that are tossed over the wall and coding all day. And the reason that I'm so that I believe in this so much isn't because Google's done it or Airbnb's done it. We've actually started measuring where did the ideas come from that have made it into production. So when we work with teams, we help them move to these empowered product teams, and developers start to contribute ideas as equals to stakeholders. And what we found in our most recent 2-month survey of 2 teams is, of the feature ideas that made it to production, 8 out of 11 came from engineers.
That's pretty cool.
For the 2 years prior to that, how many ideas do you think made it to production? Carlos, I'm going to put you on the spot.
How many ideas made it from
an engineer, made it into production, like a capability idea? Zero. And so they're working on this product 40 hours a week. They understand it exceptionally well. They know, oh yeah, we can just, why don't we do it this way? Like, we can get the same outcome or the same experience for our user if we just tweak this a little bit, and it's only going to take 3 weeks instead of 3 months. So, like, building that trust, that psychological safety, especially with engineering, where they feel like they can contribute ideas, especially if they've never been able to do that, or they feel like they can ask stupid questions, is another thing that I think, that's not as much about the product manager having that, but the product manager helping establish that inside of the company. Because all of a sudden you've got some of the smartest people in your company coming up with awesome ideas on how to improve the product, or how to reach whatever goal you're trying to reach.
And that last part that you mentioned is actually super interesting. It goes back to the first point of, you said help the company establish a culture where that's okay. Nowhere in any product manager description does it say help the company culture establish a culture of trust. That's just not part of your quote unquote job, right? But the reason you would do that, if you were in a situation where that's not the status quo, is because it's on your path from here to making the product successful. So It's not writing a spec, it's not creating a design, but it could be, as random as doing something around the culture and setting that up, because it's yet another thing that's getting in your way. So that's what I think is really cool about product management, and can sometimes intimidate people getting into it, is like, that's why it's so messy and not well defined. Because if people knew what you needed to do, every product ever would just be successful. You wouldn't need to work at it. But That's why it's hard and messy, is you kind of got to diagnose the problem and say, like, okay, it's not actually an issue about our user experience. It's not an issue with customer research. It's that no one feels free to speak up. And guess who that falls on? It falls on you to figure out for your team.
Just to chime in, and I apologize, I was a little late, but I'm a big proponent of involving the whole team. And when in the teams that I have worked before, and you can see, I'm seeing it from a different view because I'm on the consulting side. So I'm not at the company right now. In my previous company, I was. But if you don't involve the team, because you have to establish that we're all equal. We have different roles and we do different things. But however, your ideas are as important as somebody else's ideas, and your idea could be the one that takes us. Just like Brett was saying, like 8. I think we said 8 out of 11 or 11 out of 12, something like that. Because they are the ones building this thing. However, if you give them the chance to go and talk to a potential user, they might, open up some ideas that they were never thinking about, because they're like just sitting there, like, oh, just go to your corner, do what I tell you, just get it done.
Yeah.
Where is, you were talking about rapport earlier, like you have to be able to create that psychological safety, as a team, as a company, you should have it, but that's very hard. But as a team, like, speak up. You have great ideas. You're the one who knows what's doable or not in this technology, But if you talk to someone, there is something that will open up ideas, and you're like, tell me something, and give me more. And then, so I'm a big proponent of like making sure you have open and honest communication with them, and don't shut them down like, oh, that will never work, because the trust is gone. They will never tell you something else that could take you to the next level. So we're all equal. Let's have a conversation. Be upfront with like what you're trying to accomplish. Like, this is where we want to go. I don't know how, but you guys help me out. And when you have that relationship, I think you become a better team, because like Brett, you were saying earlier, like this is a team effort. If we succeed, we're all in this together. If we fail, maybe I'll take a little bit more of the blame because maybe I didn't understand something, but don't blame them. It's like, we failed. It's okay. Let's move forward. So anyway, I just think that having that team rapport is huge, and it's very hard in some of the companies that I have seen. In the previous company I was on, it was like pretty much sales led. I mean, that's a little bit of a mess, and moving to a product led is hard. So involving everyone, making sure that everybody's input is valid and they're important as part of this solution building. Once you do all that, I don't know, I think it gives them like that empowerment, like you were saying, Brad, like, oh, I can contribute to, like, you're listening to what I think. Oh, this is different. Let me chime in more. And you don't see that in all of the companies. In some, they're going that way, but I think, I don't know, just having that, like, hey, it's okay. We're all equal. You have ideas, I have ideas. Whatever the idea is coming from, like, let's just work together. Let's have consensus. See which one is the best idea. Test it out. If it works, great. If it doesn't, next. It's okay. We're not blaming you because it didn't work. Let's just move forward. We want the best for our user, for our company. How do we provide value? And let's go solve that big problem out there. So anyway, so I agree with what you guys are saying, as to just make sure that you start where. But if somebody's pushing down and say no, I will do what I tell you. You break that, and it's not going to be successful. So anyway, that's what I think.
Yeah, I think that's great. Especially, I think the key part that you mentioned around the incentive structure of not being penalized if the idea doesn't work out. That's what I think is really challenging to change if it's not set up that way at an org. You can do it at the team level and sort of start within your own team. I think that's where PMs can sort of shield engineers to some extent to say, hey, this is a safe environment for us to try stuff. And if it doesn't work out, don't worry, like, I got your back. We'll figure it out together. That, I think, is where like product can really help drive that. But if you don't have that, you're kind of creating an incentive where you're asking people, hey, stick your neck out there. And if it doesn't work out, you're gonna be on the chopping block. That's not really an environment where anyone's, going to be expected to go do that. It's just not reasonable to expect people to do that if that's sort of what they expect on the other side.
Yeah, you talked a little bit on that earlier, Super, just about the product manager de-risking things, and like, what are all, with that idea, what are all the risks associated to it? And what happens if those risks come true? Like, and how do you test those things out so that you're failing in a quick way instead of failing after 6 weeks of development, right? And so how do you test it out with some lightweight hands-on experiment? And that just takes focus and creativity, because usually those experiments, you can't whiteboard in an hour and come up with it. There's too many constraints and blockers that you're trying to work around. Just a quick time check. We've got 15 minutes left. I wanted to open it up. There's a couple more things we could talk about, but wanted to open it up to see if there were any questions or comments that anyone had.
I do have a question, actually. I can imagine as a product manager, you get input and pressure, coming from all different realms. Do you have any like tips or tricks for kind of like mediating your speech, I guess? Like, or do you just like speak the same regardless of who you're talking to? Like, do you try to get less technical depending on who you're talking to? I don't know if that makes sense.
When you say mediating, do you mean, could you say more about that?
Like, kind of, do you find that you change the way you talk or the way that you express, ideas or goals, like based on which team you're talking to, or
Gotcha.
and how do you do that smoothly?
Yeah, I think it's a really acute observation. I don't know about you, Brett, but I definitely do. And it's sort of like two axes, I would say. One is sort of like the level of detail that that person cares about. So if I'm talking to one of our leads about a project, they probably have 400 other projects on their radar across the company. And so me going into the nitty gritty of, oh, here's exactly what we did on this Jira ticket is completely irrelevant to their day to day. So kind of calibrating on like how deep you go on a topic, I think is important in when you're explaining to someone. And then on the other axis is what's the area of focus for this person? So to sort of mediate like how you communicate to them is really dependent on why are they asking you about this, or what do they want from this conversation. And if you just take a second to pause when if compliance sends me a question, they go, "Where's this project at?" Or they go, "Why is this feature set up this way?" Why they're asking about that, if I just spend a minute or two before I reply, thinking about like, where are they coming at this from? Oh, maybe they're worried about a risk with this regulation we had talked about. Okay, let me ask them, one, is this why you're asking about this? Is that what we want to dig into? And two, give them sort of a focused answer based on that and take out sort of the irrelevant stuff. That's at least what I found is helpful to do. So I guess it kind of goes back to understanding what their role is and what they're looking for.
Cool, thank you.
I don't know, Brett, what if you got any thoughts on that one? Hopefully that sort of answered your question, Becca. I feel like I just talked at it, but
yeah, no, like basically what does this person care about? What do they not care? Like, what do I need to not waste my time rambling on about, or their time? And what exactly are they looking for when they ask questions?
Yeah.
Taking a second to think about
if you
it.
don't know, just ask them.
Yeah.
Okay, what are you looking for here? Or like what part of this like are you asking about? And then usually people are just like, oh yeah, like I care about this thing, and then you can just dive in.
Cool.
Yep, I was just reading some great comments in there. Yeah, some of the best product managers I've worked with are ethnic minorities, and that the code switching that is happening might be the reason that those people are so awesome. I think that's a factor there, or it could be. Shira, that's a really interesting observation. Tyler, training your employee to be able to take your role. Someone asked me last year, as a CTO, hey, what makes the best product companies? Like where do you see in companies that are doing product or product management really well, what makes them the best? And my response was, well, it's everyone is doing product management. Like that, it's embedded into the culture, it's embedded in the mindset. And so I think that's what you're kind of like touches on what you're saying, where you're training someone to take your role. It's like you're kind of training everyone to take your role. Like the developers are thinking about when they're approaching tech debt, like they're not thinking about, what's the most antiquated technology we have and what cool technology can we migrate it to. They're thinking about what's the problem with our tech debt? What bad thing happens if we don't address it? Maybe it's okay that we have this tech debt, but hey, if we don't address this tech debt, then it's going to result in these negative outcomes. So I always ask, part of it is that kind of circling back around. Part of it is understanding what your audience wants to hear, like whether it's a CPO is going to care differently about someone, a product manager who's like needs information, or a marketing person who needs information to help with the project or to help with the initiative, right? So the level of details are going to be different there. I think you said something about like Do you talk differently to technical people, the non-technically different? Yeah, there's some of that. I mean, if I ask a developer, what's the value of addressing this tech debt? It's like cold stare. What do you mean? If I ask them, what's the bad thing that happens if we don't address this tech debt? So there's tips and tricks as to just how you phrase things that make it easier for people to understand, and you just kind of pick those things up. So how you frame it is important, like how you make it simple for people to understand. And the other thing is, like, most companies are very unstructured. And so when product management's not in the room, there's often a lot of spin and confusion. And so one of the things that we do, that product managers do really well, is they bring structure to those conversations. They help people think, okay, who cares about all the things we're talking about? Like, what is really important here? Like, what do we need to do? Like, do we need to increase our acquisition? Is retention an issue? Like, who cares about this feature or this capability? Like, let's take a step back. Like, they're asking the 5 whys, a lot. And so they can bring they can bring alignment to the conversation, because now people understand really ultimately what the North Star looks like, what success looks like. And then you say, okay, now that we're aligned up here, let's take it down a level and start to have those conversations around, does this feature still make sense? Should we build this or buy it? Like, because most companies go right into, we need to build this, or we need to buy this, or no, we need Tableau, or we need this other visualization tool. It's like, let's take a step back. What are we really trying to do here? So they bring that structure to those conversations.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing too is product management. You work with engineers, designers, researchers, all these different people, and you're not really on their career path. It's not like you're the engineering manager, and engineers sometimes want to become engineering managers. It's sort of like a different sort of path. So it's not, at least in my experience, not necessarily always that it's part of your role to sort of teach them how to be like a product manager across the board, unless they want to do that and they've sort of expressed interest in that. But it's more exactly what Brett's saying, which is, what skills that have we picked up as product managers that could help them in their day-to-day or help the team overall, and sort of focusing in on saying, okay, if this is the area you as the engineer are trying to get better at, I could help you with that part of it, and not necessarily, how you do the role overall. But Tyler, if you're interested in that, I'm not sure what you do today, but if you're interested in that, I think reaching out to product managers that or just getting an understanding of what their day-to-day looks like is probably a great place to start, just to see, are there certain aspects of that you like, or is it really the whole aspect of everything in the role that might be interesting to you?
Are there any other questions or things people wanted to share? So, Super, I'll put you on the spot. If you were someone trying to break into product management, you talked a little bit about it, talking to some people, what might be some other things? There's a lot of folks who are interested in getting or learning more about product management or getting into it. What would you recommend?
Ooh, good question. Big question. I've always kind of just learned by reading. So my default is to go read a whole bunch of blog posts and articles and books, sort of the usual suspects of, from Marty Cagan that you mentioned earlier. And it's not like that those things will have the answers for how to do the job, but those things will help you ask the right questions when you go meet with people who are doing the job. You kind of build a baseline of understanding, and then you can kind of this bedrock built out from reading all these things online. And now you're going to have a million questions. You read the thing and go, well, what about this? Or how does that actually work day to day? And getting to the point where you know what questions to ask, I think requires just reading about that on your own. And then I would just reach out to people. I guess this is a great example. You all came here, you're asking questions, you're trying to figure out what is it actually like. just do more of that. And I think Columbus is great because you can just basically reach out to anyone and just see if they can grab some time to talk to you, whether it's Zoom or, in person, whenever that works out. People are just really open to it. So I would do that. And the other cool part that I did sort of early on is you don't really need anyone's permission to start doing product management. Go on your favorite site or product, like I love Twitter. So, and just go write the product spec for retweeting. Go write the product spec for people who've been asking for editing tweets for literally ever. There's good reason that they have not created editable tweets. What are those reasons? You could probably go write that product spec today and think about what are the downsides of doing that, letting the user edit the tweets. Do you let them edit it forever? Do you have a window of time? If you edit the tweet and someone retweeted it before, how do they go see the original version? Can it be misleading? There's just like a billion questions that pop up if you just think about that feature. And just doing the mechanics of doing that yourself, you don't need anyone's permission to go do that. And that practice, I think, will help, in your current role, if you're already in product, or if you're looking to get into it, just give you an understanding of what it's like.
Yeah, that's a great call. Thanks, Super. Thanks for taking the time to meet and talk today and share some of your perspectives.
Yeah.
If you guys are interested, we do this monthly meetup. We've had anywhere from the small groups to larger meetups. So you can find it at meetup.com. I think you probably get the emails now. I think it's the last Wednesday of every month. So, definitely come back. I think once we get in live, like in-person events, these become even more fun because you get to meet a bunch of people that are, interested in learning more and interested in helping people too. I think that's one of the coolest part of, these meetups. Becca, anything else? Thank you for helping produce this and moderate. Is there anything else you can think of that I might have missed?
No, I just threw out that little feedback poll, but I just wanted to, say how, reiterate what you just said. These are great. And sometimes all you got to do is log on and listen to somebody talk, but getting able to participate and ask questions of people that are, experts or like talking about these sort of things, it's just really cool. So thanks to you guys.
Yeah, this was fun. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Super. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for coming.
See you guys.
See y'all.